My name is Eliana Sheely, and I am a software specialist at PSPR.
Hello, my name is Chloe Gilmore. I use she, her pronouns, and I am part of the marketing crew at PSPR.
Great. Well, nice to meet you guys, and thanks for having me today. I'm happy to try and answer any questions. And I guess I would just say thank you guys so much for standing up this effort. It's great to see students be so involved in the community and so engaged. So thank you. So my name is Katie Sharff. I'm an infectious disease physician with Kaiser Permanente. And I actually grew up in Portland, Oregon. I went to college back in Massachusetts at a small college called Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, and then did my medical school at the University of Chicago and returned to Oregon for my residency and fellowship training in infectious disease. And I practiced in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for a short time, and then have been practicing at Kaiser Permanente for, I think, sorry, I have to do the math here, 7 or 8 years. I think 7 years, maybe, somewhere in there. So, and just happy to be in Portland.
Great. We can jump into the questions now.
Great.
The first question that we received from students was, do you think that there's a chance that Portland students might have to go back to online learning this school year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that this is an important question to students, and I have 2 elementary age children myself, so an important question to me as a parent. So I am hopeful that our society and government will prioritize in-person learning for all students, and that is the current plan, is to prioritize in-person learning for all students because we know of the critical benefits of being with your classmates. I am hopeful that we won't have to go back to full-time online learning, although I do suspect with the amount of Delta variant and the number of COVID-19 infections we are seeing in the community, there will be periods of time this school year where a number of students may need to be either in quarantine, which means that you were exposed, or isolation, which means that you were infected, and have to do some sort of online or virtual learning when you're unable to attend school. But I think that we would be really hard pressed to completely go back into a lockdown where students are not able to attend class in person.
All right. And the next question is, will we have to make new vaccines for the Delta and other variants? Or will we get boosters every few years, or just stick with our current vaccines?
Yeah, these are great questions. So currently there's a lot of active research happening to make updated vaccines for the next variant strain. So, I think that there will be updated vaccines that target future variant strains. And additionally, this question of boosters. So booster is a vaccine that really enhances your immune system, and it is becoming more and more evident that we will need to get booster doses at some point in the near future. So I think there will need to be booster doses, whether the booster doses with the original type of vaccine you got or some slightly modified version as new variants emerge remains to be seen, or some combination thereof.
All right, the next question is, what are the precautions that vaccinated healthy people should be taking against Delta in day-to-day life and going back to school, and how does that differ from unvaccinated people?
Mm-hmm. This is a good question, and one that I think has been quite controversial. So what we know about the current variant that's circulating, the Delta variant, is that it is much more contagious than the original wild type or original COVID strain that was circulating. And so whereas the original strain, if one person was infected, they might infect a couple other people. With this Delta variant, one person could potentially spread the infection to anywhere from 5 to 9 other people. So just that much more contagious. I think the precautions should be similar to what we've been doing all along. So masking when indoors, so facial coverings when indoors, or in outdoor very crowded spaces. So if you go to a concert and are dancing close with other individuals, it's worthwhile to wear a mask, or other outdoor events where there's a lot of crowding. Other things I would say is really try and maximize the amount of time you spend outdoors, because we know that being in outdoor spaces is much safer. And then again, trying to minimize that crowding, so that term socially distancing or maintaining adequate spacing among people will help. In terms of what unvaccinated versus vaccinated, I would encourage both to take similar precautions. I think really the message is that if you're unvaccinated, you need to go get vaccinated right now. There's really no other way around it. That is your best protection against getting sick, getting hospitalized, or even dying from COVID. So if you're unvaccinated, you really need to go get vaccinated. But these additional measures can enhance those precautions. I've heard one analogy. It's like, in terms of when you're driving a car, you want your seatbelt, but you also want your airbags. So just how many different measures of enhanced precautions you can take.
Great. And then here's the next question. I live in a fully vaccinated family of 4 with parents working from home. My parents are concerned about Delta and want to limit all time indoors with other people. I understand avoiding crowds, malls, concerts, even not eating inside restaurants. But is it actually necessary to say no to having 1 or 2 also fully vaccinated people come over for dinner at our house? How should vaccinated people be protecting ourselves and others against Delta? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what this COVID pandemic has shown us is that there is no one universal answer to every scenario, and every family and every individual is going to have different comfort levels with risk and be able to tolerate different levels of risk. And so if one family has certain rules about how they approach the pandemic and precautions, it may differ from your friends or your relatives. I think what also goes into these decisions is looking at your family members, and if you have family members that are at risk for getting really sick, so they have underlying medical problems that would make them more prone to being really sick if they were infected with COVID, that family might take more precautions. And so I guess what I would say to this question is every family is going to approach COVID a little bit differently. What we know is that if you are fully vaccinated against COVID, even with the Delta variant circulating, you are extremely unlikely to become severely ill, hospitalized, or die from COVID. And so I think that can provide some reassurance that you may be able to socialize and interact with other fully vaccinated individuals. But again, each family is going to have a certain threshold of risk they're willing to tolerate. So it's going to be kind of a personal decision.
Okay, and then the next question is it still safe to travel if you take precautions and are vaccinated?
Yeah, so I think the first question is how are you traveling and where are you going? So there's so many different ways to travel. Are you going by car, like your own car? Are you taking a bus? Are you going by airplane? Are you going by train? And where are you headed? Are you headed, to Disney World in Florida, where we know that COVID is out of control? Or are you headed to other parts of the U.S. where they have much higher vaccination rates and much better COVID precautions? So there's a lot that goes into this question of is it safe to travel? In terms of traveling, let's see here, by, let's say, airplane, for example, what we know about traveling by airplane is that the filtration systems in the airplane, once the airplane jets are fully turned on, are really quite efficient and effective. And if you are fully vaccinated and wearing a mask and everyone else on the airplane is wearing a mask, I think the likelihood of acquiring COVID while sitting on the airplane is quite low. That being said, you have to think about all of the time spent surrounding that airplane trip. So, your time in the taxi cab to the airport, your time spent at the airport, your time sitting in the airport eating, and all of that goes into travel. So what I would say, from a personal standpoint, I have traveled this summer. I did wear a mask and took, full precautions. I am fully vaccinated, but I don't think there's any 100% secure scenario where you won't acquire COVID, but I think you can make smart choices in terms of where you travel and how to travel safely if you're fully vaccinated at this current time in the pandemic.
All right. And this question is, how different is the Delta variant from previous strains of COVID-19?
So what we know about the Delta variant compared to prior strains is that it's much more infectious and it's much more contagious, and it may cause more severe disease. So as I said earlier, whereas the original strain, if you were infected, you might infect, a couple other people. With the Delta variant, if you're infected, you have 1,000 times higher viral load in your nose, and you can infect up from 5 to 9 people. So that much more contagious. And what we're seeing is, more severe disease, and unfortunately more severe disease in young people, whereas the original strain, predominantly we saw illness in the elderly. We're seeing a lot more young people get sick. And I think part of that is just that young people aren't as likely to be vaccinated, and young people are that much more mobile, out and about in society, going to school, hanging out with friends, going to events. But it's a bad bug, and it really is that much more contagious and that much more severe. So I would say take it seriously.
And how many variants like Delta should we expect to see in the coming months and years?
I don't think anybody knows for sure. We can all make guesses, but nobody really knows. I guess what I would say is that as long as we have large parts of the community in the United States and the world who remain unvaccinated, those individuals act as what we call a reservoir, essentially like a breeding ground for more of these terrible variants that are more infectious, more contagious, and potentially won't respond to our current vaccines. And so until we truly have a global strategy to vaccinate the world, we are at risk of having some emerging variants that really can make you more ill or more contagious and eventually not be effective against the vaccines. And so not to paint a total doom and gloom picture, but it is quite scary to think about what could be the next variant after Delta, because look how bad Delta is. Our hospitals are completely full. We don't have enough beds. We don't have enough staffing. And who knows if the next variant will be even worse.
And who is currently most at risk for getting infected and facing severe illness from the Delta variant?
So again, if you are unvaccinated, you are at risk of getting infected from the Delta variant. And I know that there are individuals like my own children who are not eligible for vaccine. But I would say if you are listening to this audio cast and you are currently unvaccinated, you need to go get vaccinated, because it's not a matter of if you get infected with Delta if you're unvaccinated, it's a matter of when. And so, you know, the best protection for you is to get vaccinated. And, you know, we are unfortunately seeing some really young, healthy people suffering from severe infection with Delta. And it's heartbreaking. And I would hate for one of your friends or classmates to get sick because, you know, they could have gotten vaccinated. This is a vaccine preventable disease and a vaccine preventable pandemic that we're in right now at this point.
And then our next question is, Dr. Sharff, do you personally anticipate that a COVID variant will form that is more lethal and dangerous than the Delta variant?
Yeah, I mean, this is what, you know, keeps me up at night, aside from the Delta variant and everything that we're facing right now, is kind of what's around the corner, as we know that we have all of these individuals in the United States, but, you know, globally who remain unvaccinated. It's just a reservoir for the next variant to emerge. And what worries me the most is the variant that emerges where our current vaccines don't protect against severe illness, hospitalization, and death. And that's going to be a really tragic day. I mean, we are already at a tragic point in this pandemic, but that will be even more tragic when we get to the point where all of this ground that we've made has been lost because we weren't effective at a global vaccine rollout, and we weren't effective at a vaccine rollout within the United States in terms of getting our country vaccinated.
And the next question is, why hasn't herd immunity in Oregon been enough of a defense against the virus for us to stay mask-free?
Yeah, so, you know, initially back in, March of 2020, this term of herd immunity was thrown around a lot. And I think we really need to reevaluate herd immunity. So herd immunity is when enough people either are vaccinated or have had the disease that you don't see spread within the community. And it appears that we are not going to reach herd immunity with COVID-19. And that being said is because as the variants emerge, they're that much more contagious. And so it requires more and more individuals to get vaccinated. And if you continue to have pockets of people that don't get vaccinated, they're enough of like, they provide enough kind of fuel for the next surge. So it's almost like if you have this wildfire and you put out most of the wildfire, but you still have this kind of like low burning embers in one area. If you don't take care of those low burning embers, eventually they're going to flare up again, and we're going to have another surge in that area. So you really have to put out the entire wildfire. You have to vaccinate everybody or have them all be protected, because if you have those kind of low burning embers, it'll flare up again. And that's kind of an analogy of why we won't reach herd immunity with this COVID-19 pandemic. And so really the goal is to achieve as much protection in the community as we can, that we're able to suppress the disease, kind of like we see with flu, where every year we deal with flu, but we're able to manage it.
And finally, someone asked, will the globe reach the 70% first vaccination dose immunization before the vaccine effectiveness is no longer strong?
Yeah, I think this is that question of, you know, are we going to be able to vaccinate enough people before that next terrible variant emerges that no longer responds. And unfortunately, I think the answer is no. You know, we know in many countries they've only been able to offer vaccine to a fraction of their population, like 2 or 3%. So our global vaccine rollout, unfortunately, has not been as effective as we'd want it to be. And so I would say that as much as I wish that we had global vaccination for all of the world, we just aren't there yet. And so I anticipate we'll have more emerging variants that are even more lethal than Delta. But right now, as an individual, the best thing you can do to keep yourself protected from COVID is to go get vaccinated. And so if there's one message for all of you, it's that if you have not yet gotten vaccinated, now is the time, because that is truly the best protection. And unfortunately, we are seeing young people, like young people getting sick, really sick, like needing ventilators and not being able to breathe. And it's really terrifying and it's really tragic. And if you are eligible for a vaccine, if you are 12 or older, like please go get vaccinated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. That's the end of the question portion.
Okay.
And thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Sharff. And for those watching at home, I hope that your question was answered or that you learned something.
Great. Thank you, guys. And I guess I would just put in a plug that medicine is a really amazing field and there's so much to learn, and it's a great profession. So as you are, continuing your education, think about medicine. It really truly is a rewarding specialty.
All right. Thank you so much.